The transport ship Meridian's Hope hummed through the void between star systems, carrying its cargo of human colonists toward the newly established settlement of New Haven. Marcuston sat in the cramped passenger compartment, his weathered hands gently holding those of his wife, Elena. After 23 years of marriage, he still found comfort in her touch, especially during the long journey to their new home. Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her dark hair falling across her face as she tried to find a better position. The artificial gravity on the transport felt different from Earth's pull, and the constant vibration from the engines made rest difficult. Marcus noticed her discomfort and reached into their small bag of personal items, pulling out a thin pillow. "Here, love," he said softly, placing it behind her back. "We only have 6 more hours until we reach New Haven." Elena smiled at him, the same warm expression that had captured his heart decades ago when they first met at the university library. She was studying xenobiology then, fascinated by the possibility of life beyond Earth. Marcus had been working toward his engineering degree, but found himself spending more time in the library than his own dormitory, just to catch glimpses of the brilliant woman who always sat at the corner table surrounded by books about distant worlds. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this," Elena whispered, squeezing his hand. "Leaving everything behind to start over on an alien world." Marcus understood her mixture of excitement and nervousness. They had both lost their jobs when the manufacturing company he worked for closed down, and Elena's research position at the university had been eliminated due to budget cuts. The colonial recruitment program had offered them a chance to begin again, using their skills to help build something new among the stars. The passenger compartment held 47 humans, all seeking the same fresh start. Most kept to themselves during the journey, but Marcus had spoken with several families who shared similar stories of economic hardship and dreams of opportunity. The colonial authorities had been selective in their choices, wanting people with practical skills who could contribute to establishing a sustainable settlement. A soft chime echoed through the compartment, followed by the captain's voice over the communication system. "Attention passengers, we are approaching the Kepler station checkpoint. All passengers remain seated while we complete standard protocols with station authority." Marcus felt Elena tense beside him. They had heard stories about Kepler Station, a massive commercial hub controlled by the Hegemony Council. The station served as a neutral meeting point where multiple alien species conducted trade and diplomacy. While humans had been granted limited access to certain areas, they remained second-class participants in galactic commerce. Through the small viewport beside their seats, Marcus could see the station growing larger as they approached. The structure was enormous, stretching several kilometers in each direction, with docking bays that could accommodate ships from dozens of different species. Lights flickered across its surface in patterns that seemed almost organic, as if the station itself was alive. "It's beautiful," Elena breathed, pressing her face closer to the viewport. The Meridian's Hope shuddered slightly as the station's tractor beams guided them toward one of the smaller docking bays reserved for human vessels. Marcus could see other ships nearby, their designs unlike anything built by human engineers. Some appeared to be grown rather than constructed, with flowing curves that defied conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Within minutes, they heard the mechanical sounds of docking clamps securing their ship to the station. The captain's voice returned, explaining that they would have a 4-hour layover while the ship took on supplies and completed required inspections. Passengers were welcome to visit the commercial sectors of the station, but must remain in designated human-accessible areas. Most of the colonists chose to stretch their legs and explore, though many were nervous about venturing into an environment dominated by alien species. Marcus and Elena decided to walk around the station together, curious to see examples of the galactic civilization they had only read about in reports. The docking bay was utilitarian and sterile, but once they passed through the security checkpoint, the station opened into vast corridors filled with incredible sights. The artificial gravity felt normal, but the air carried strange scents that reminded Marcus of ozone and exotic spices. Beings from multiple worlds moved through the corridors, conducting business or simply traveling to distant destinations. Elena marveled at the diversity of life forms around them. Some aliens walked on 2 legs like humans, while others moved on multiple limbs or floated using technology Marcus couldn't begin to understand. The variety of sizes was equally impressive, from creatures no larger than house cats to towering beings that required specially constructed pathways. They found a small cafe area designated for multi-species use, where the atmosphere was adjusted to accommodate different respiratory needs. Elena studied the other patrons with the fascination of a scientist, while Marcus kept one eye on their surroundings and another on the time display showing how long until their ship departed. Look at the communication methods, Elena whispered excitedly. That group is using color patterns on their skin to talk, and those others seem to be using some kind of electromagnetic field manipulation. Marcus nodded, though he was more interested in observing the social dynamics. He noticed that humans were generally ignored by the other species, neither welcomed nor rejected, simply treated as another minor presence in the vast complexity of galactic civilization. It was clear that humanity's role in this larger community was still being determined. They were preparing to return to their ship when trouble found them. A group of Zalari had entered the cafe area, their tall, lean forms immediately commanding attention. The Zalari were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and their attitude of superiority toward what they considered primitive species. Their skin was pale blue-gray, and their movements were precise and calculated. One of the Zalari, wearing what appeared to be an official uniform indicating high rank, noticed Elena studying a holographic display showing different star systems. His large, dark eyes fixed on her with an expression that Marcus immediately recognized as predatory interest. The Zalari approached their table with measured steps, his companions following behind. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Human female," the Zalari said in accented but clear English, "you display curiosity about matters beyond your species' understanding. Perhaps you require proper education from those with superior knowledge." Elena looked up politely, assuming this was some form of academic discussion. Her background in xenobiology had taught her to approach contact with alien species with respect and scientific interest. "I find your stellar navigation systems fascinating," Elena replied. "The integration of gravitational field manipulation with quantum displacement theory is far more elegant than our current human methods." The Zalari's expression shifted, and Marcus recognized dangerous interest in the alien's dark eyes. This was not academic curiosity but something far more troubling. Such intelligence in a primitive species deserves closer examination, the Zalari continued, stepping nearer to Elena. "I am Commander Vexhal of the Zalari Science Council. You will accompany me to my laboratory for detailed study of your neural patterns and genetic structure." Marcus felt his entire body go cold as he realized what was happening. This was not a request or even a command, but a simple statement of intent. The Zalari fully expected Elena to comply without resistance, as if she were no more than an interesting specimen to be collected and examined. "That's very kind," Elena said carefully, "but we're passengers on a colonial transport that leaves in less than an hour. Perhaps we could arrange some other time for discussion." Commander Vexhal made a sound that might have been laughter, though it held no warmth or humor. His companions moved to positions that would block any attempt at escape, their movements coordinated and practiced. "You misunderstand," Vexhal said, reaching out toward Elena with one long-fingered hand. "This is not a request that you may decline. Your compliance is assumed." Before Marcus could react, the Zalari's hand touched Elena's shoulder, and she immediately went rigid. Her eyes widened in shock and fear as some kind of neural manipulation device hidden in the alien's palm sent controlling impulses into her nervous system. She tried to speak but could only make soft, frightened sounds as her body ceased to obey her commands. "The neural override will ensure cooperation during transport," Vexhal explained casually, as if discussing the weather. "Human neural pathways are primitive enough that basic control is easily achieved. She will experience no permanent damage, provided she survives the examination process." Marcus felt something fundamental snap inside his mind as he watched his wife's terrified eyes pleading for help while her body remained frozen under alien control. 23 years of gentle conversation and shared dreams, of quiet evenings and whispered promises, of building a life together based on mutual respect and love, condensed into a single moment of absolute clarity. The Zalari had made a critical error in their understanding of human nature. They saw Marcus as another primitive being who would accept their superiority and surrender his mate without resistance. They had studied human technology and human society, but they had never encountered a human male whose wife was being threatened. Marcus rose from his chair with movements that seemed deceptively calm and controlled. His voice, when he spoke, carried a tone that Elena had never heard before, something that reached back to humanity's most ancient and dangerous heritage. "Let go of my wife," Marcus said quietly, "and walk away. Right now." Commander Vexhal looked at Marcus with the same expression he might use when observing an insect that had made threatening gestures. The concept that this primitive being might actually resist was so foreign to his understanding that he initially dismissed it as impossible. "Return to your vessel, human male," Vexhal said dismissively. Your mate will be returned when examination is complete, assuming she survives the process. You have no authority to interfere with Solari research protocols. Marcus took a single step forward, and something in his movement caused the other aliens in the cafe to suddenly take notice. Conversation stopped, and the atmosphere changed as predatory instincts recognized something dangerous approaching. I'm going to give you one more chance, Marcus said, his voice still quiet but carrying undertones that made several nearby species move away from the confrontation. Let go of my wife, or I will make you regret every decision that brought you to this moment. The Zalari commander made his final mistake by reaching for a control device that would increase the neural override affecting Elena. He never completed the motion. Marcus moved with speed that surprised everyone present, including himself. His hand closed around the Zalari's wrist before the device could be activated, and he squeezed with strength born of 20 years working in heavy manufacturing combined with desperation and fury that had no limits. The sound of breaking bones was audible throughout the cafe, followed immediately by Commander Vexhal's scream of pain and shock. The neural override device fell from nerveless fingers, and Elena gasped as control of her body returned. That, Marcus said, still holding the Zalari's shattered wrist, was your last chance. The other Zalari moved to help their commander, but stopped when they saw the expression on Marcus's face. Whatever they observed there convinced them that this human was far more dangerous than their initial assessment had suggested. Elena struggled to her feet, still shaking from the effects of the neural manipulation, and moved behind her husband. She had never seen Marcus like this, had never imagined that the gentleman she married possessed this capacity for controlled violence. You have assaulted a commander of the Zalari Science Council, one of Vexhal's companions said, though his voice lacked conviction. The consequences will be severe. Marcus released the injured Zalari's wrist and took a step back, though his posture remained threatening. Around the cafe, other species watched the confrontation with interest, some recording the events for later analysis. The consequences, Marcus said clearly, will depend entirely on what happens next. If you leave now and never approach my wife again, this ends here. If you make any other choice, you'll discover exactly what happens when humans decide that peaceful coexistence is no longer an option. Commander Vexhal clutched his injured wrist, his pale skin now flushed with darker colors that Elena recognized as signs of pain and shock in Zalari physiology. The confidence and arrogance that had defined his approach were completely gone, replaced by the dawning realization that he had severely underestimated the species he considered primitive. The cafe had become completely silent, with dozens of alien eyes focused on the small drama playing out between the humans and Zalari. For many of the observers, this was their first direct contact with humanity's capacity for protective violence, and the implications were troubling. A new voice interrupted the standoff, speaking in the universal trade language before switching to English. Station security is responding to this location. All parties will submit to questioning and potential detention. Marcus felt Elena's hand touch his arm, and some of the rage burning in his chest began to cool. He had protected her from immediate danger, but their situation was far from resolved. Station security would likely side with the Zalari, given their status in galactic politics, and humans had little legal standing in disputes with more established species. We should go, Elena whispered urgently. Our ship leaves in 30 minutes. But Marcus knew that running would solve nothing. The Zalari commander would recover from his injury and remember this humiliation. More importantly, other aliens had witnessed a human successfully resist Zalari authority, and word would spread throughout the station and beyond. No, Marcus said firmly, though he kept his voice low enough that only Elena could hear. If we run now, they'll come after us eventually, and next time they'll be prepared. This needs to end here, one way or another. Station security arrived in the form of 3 heavily armed beings from a species Marcus didn't recognize, their equipment designed to handle conflicts between multiple alien races. They surveyed the scene quickly, noting the injured Zalari commander and the defensive posture of the humans. Explain, the lead security officer demanded, his voice rendered into English by a translation device. Commander Vexhal was the first to speak, his words rushing together as he tried to establish control of the narrative. This primitive human attacked me without provocation while I was conducting lawful scientific inquiry. I demand immediate arrest and extradition for assault on a Zalari Science Council representative. The security officer turned to Marcus, who realized that his next words would determine not only their immediate fate, but possibly the future relationship between humanity and the larger galactic community. My wife and I were preparing to return to our transport when Commander Vexhal approached us, Marcus said calmly. He used a neural manipulation device on my wife without her consent, intending to take her to his laboratory for what he called detailed study. I defended her from what any reasonable being would recognize as assault and attempted kidnapping. Elena stepped forward, still shaking but determined to support her husband's account. I can provide testimony about the neural override device, she said. The effects are still measurable, and I have training in xenobiology that allows me to describe exactly what was done to me. The lead security officer looked between the humans and the Zalari, clearly trying to assess the competing claims. Commander Vexhal's injury was obvious, but the presence of the neural override device and Elena's condition as a victim of its effects complicated the legal situation. Other aliens in the cafe began offering their own observations, and Marcus realized that several species had been recording the entire confrontation. The universal translation systems allowed the security officers to quickly review multiple perspectives on what had occurred. After several minutes of consultation with his fellow officers and examination of the available evidence, the lead security officer reached a decision that would send ripples throughout the galactic community. The Zalari commander initiated unauthorized use of neural manipulation technology against an unwilling subject, the officer announced. Defense of a mate against such assault is recognized under station protocols as justified response. No charges will be filed against the humans. Commander Vexhal's expression transformed into something approaching disbelief. You cannot seriously consider the word of primitives over that of a Zalari Science Council representative. The security officer's response was delivered in a tone that brooked no argument. Station law applies equally to all species, regardless of technological development or political status. The evidence clearly shows assault by neural manipulation followed by justified defensive response. Marcus felt Elena lean against him, relief evident in her posture as the immediate legal threat dissolved. But he also noticed the expressions on the faces of the Zalari commander and his companions. This was far from over. As station security escorted the Zalari away for medical treatment and formal questioning, Marcus and Elena made their way back toward their transport. Other passengers from the Meridian's Hope had gathered near the docking bay, word of the confrontation having spread quickly through the human community. Is it true, asked Sarah Martinez, a teacher who was traveling with her 2 children to take a position at the new colony school. Did you really fight off Zalari kidnappers? Marcus shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention. I protected my wife from someone who was trying to hurt her. That's what any husband would do. But even as he spoke the words, Marcus could see the effect his actions were having on the other colonists. These were people who had spent their lives being told that humanity was a minor species in galactic affairs, that their role was to be grateful for whatever small place they were allowed to occupy. The idea that a human could successfully stand up to one of the galaxy's more powerful species was transforming their understanding of their own potential. Elena squeezed his arm as they boarded their transport. Thank you, she whispered. I was so scared, and then, you were just there. I've never seen anything like it. Marcus settled into his seat as the ship prepared for departure, but his mind was already working through the implications of what had occurred. Commander Vexhal would not simply forget this incident, and the Zalari as a species were not known for their forgiveness. More importantly, word of a successful human resistance to Zalari authority would spread throughout the galaxy, potentially changing how other species viewed humanity. As the Meridian's Hope detached from Kepler Station and resumed course toward New Haven, Marcus looked out at the stars and wondered what kind of future he had just set in motion. He had acted on instinct and love, without considering the larger consequences, but now he realized that his defense of Elena might have implications far beyond their marriage. The colonial transport hummed through space toward their new home, carrying 47 humans who now understood that they were not as powerless as they had been told. Behind them, a space station buzzed with conversations about the incident in the cafe, as multiple species reassessed their understanding of human nature and capabilities. In a medical bay on Kepler Station, Commander Vexhal stared at his bandaged wrist and contemplated revenge against the primitive species that had dared to humiliate him. His plans would soon extend far beyond the single human who had broken his bones, encompassing the entire colonial settlement of New Haven. The first phase of the conflict had ended with an unexpected human victory, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. The colonial settlement of New Haven stretched across a valley between 2 mountain ranges on the planet Kepler 442b, its prefabricated structures arranged in careful patterns that maximized efficiency while maintaining defensive considerations. Marcus stood on the observation platform of the settlement's central administration building, watching the sunrise paint the alien sky in shades of gold and amber that reminded him of Earth mornings despite the subtle differences in the star's spectrum. 3 months had passed since the incident on Kepler station, and life in the colony had developed its own rhythm. Elena had thrown herself into her work as the settlement's chief xenobiologist, studying the planet's ecosystem to ensure that human agriculture and native species could coexist safely. Marcus had been appointed as head of the engineering department, responsible for maintaining the infrastructure that kept their small community of 2,000 colonists alive and thriving. The work was challenging but rewarding, giving both of them a sense of purpose they had lost during their final years on Earth. New Haven represented humanity's determination to build something lasting among the stars, a testament to the species' ability to adapt and grow even in the face of an often hostile galaxy. But Marcus had not forgotten the cold hatred in Commander Vexhal's eyes during their confrontation, and recent reports from other human settlements had been troubling. 3 colonies had reported technical failures that seemed suspiciously coordinated, and 2 trading posts had lost contact with their parent organizations entirely. The pattern suggested systematic interference, though proving Zolari involvement was proving impossible. "You're thinking about them again," Elena said, joining him on the observation platform with 2 cups of the synthetic coffee that served as one of the colony's few luxuries. "The Zolari." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, appreciating the warmth against the cool morning air. "I can't help feeling like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Vexhal didn't strike me as someone who would simply forget what happened." Elena leaned against the railing beside him, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains where automated mining equipment was extracting the rare minerals that made New Haven economically viable. "Maybe he learned his lesson. Maybe the Zolari realized that humans aren't as helpless as they thought. Or maybe they're planning something we can't anticipate," Marcus replied. "You saw how shocked he was when I fought back. They're not used to resistance from species they consider inferior. That kind of attitude doesn't usually change because of one confrontation." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Governor Catherine Walsh, the elected leader of New Haven's colonial government. Walsh was a former military officer who had commanded respect both on Earth and during the long journey to establish the settlement. Her presence on the observation platform at such an early hour suggested urgent business. "Marcus, Elena, I need to speak with both of you immediately," Walsh said, her expression grim. "We've received communication from Kepler station that affects your situation specifically." They followed Walsh to her office in the administration building, where a holographic display showed the text of an official message from the Galactic Trade Consortium. Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he read the formal language that barely concealed its threatening undertones. The message informed the colonial government that Commander Vexhal had filed formal charges against Marcus Chen for assault and injury of a Zolari Science Council representative. The consortium demanded that Marcus be surrendered for trial and punishment according to Zolari legal traditions, which would involve neural modification to ensure permanent compliance with galactic authority. "They can't be serious," Elena said, her voice rising with indignation. The station security cleared Marcus of any wrongdoing. "This is harassment, pure and simple." Governor Walsh nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, the Galactic Trade Consortium operates under different legal frameworks than individual stations. The Zolari have significant influence in the consortium, and they're using that leverage to pursue this matter." Marcus studied the message more carefully, noting the deadline for compliance and the consequences outlined for refusal. "What happens if New Haven refuses to surrender me?" "Economic sanctions first," Walsh explained. "They'll cut off our access to galactic markets, which means no more advanced technology imports and no buyers for our mineral exports. After that, they could escalate to direct intervention." The implications were clear and devastating. New Haven depended on trade with the galactic community for advanced medical equipment, specialized manufacturing tools, and the technological components that kept their fusion reactors and atmospheric processors functioning. Economic isolation would slowly strangle the colony, forcing the colonists to choose between their principles and their survival. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. 30 standard days, Walsh replied. They're also demanding that Elena submit to voluntary examination by Zolari scientists, ostensibly to verify that she suffered no permanent damage from the neural override device. Elena's face went pale as she understood the real purpose behind the examination request. They want to study human neural patterns to develop better control methods. "I won't be a test subject for their experiments." Marcus felt the same cold fury that had driven him to break Vexhal's wrist beginning to build again, but this time he forced himself to think strategically rather than react emotionally. The Zolari were using legal and economic pressure because direct confrontation had proven embarrassing, but their ultimate goals remained the same. "What options do we have?" he asked Governor Walsh. "Limited ones," she admitted. "We could appeal to other galactic species for support, but most are reluctant to antagonize the Zolari over what they see as an internal human matter. We could try to find loopholes in galactic law, but the consortium's legal system heavily favors established species over newer members." Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling activity of the colonial settlement. Families were beginning their daily routines, children walking to school while their parents reported to various work assignments. These people had risked everything to build a new life among the stars, and now their future was threatened because he had refused to let aliens experiment on his wife. "There is one other possibility," Walsh continued quietly. "We could consider voluntary relocation to a non-consortium world. There are independent systems that don't recognize Zolari authority, though they offer far fewer opportunities for trade and development." Elena shook her head immediately. "That's not a solution, it's surrender. We'd be abandoning everything we've built here, and the Zolari would learn that they can intimidate humans into compliance whenever it suits them." Marcus turned back to face the governor and his wife, his decision already crystallizing. "What if we refuse to comply and prepare to defend ourselves?" Walsh looked skeptical. "Marcus, I understand your frustration, but we're talking about one of the galaxy's most advanced military forces. New Haven has defensive systems designed to handle raiders and wildlife, not a coordinated assault by Zolari warships." "Maybe not," Marcus said slowly, "but we have advantages they don't expect. They still think of humans as primitive and predictable. They're planning for easy compliance or token resistance, not a real fight." Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into research on Zolari military capabilities and human defensive options. The colony's computer systems contained extensive databases on galactic species, including detailed analysis of their strengths and weaknesses compiled by human intelligence services. What he discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The Zolari possessed overwhelming technological advantages in space combat and energy weapons, but their ground forces relied heavily on neural manipulation devices and psychological warfare rather than conventional military tactics. They were accustomed to opponents who either surrendered immediately or fought in predictable patterns. More importantly, Marcus learned that Zolari physiology included several vulnerabilities that human military planners had identified but never had opportunity to exploit. Their advanced nervous systems that allowed for such sophisticated technology also made them extremely susceptible to certain types of electromagnetic interference. Their pale skin provided poor protection against ultraviolet radiation, limiting their effectiveness in direct sunlight. Elena contributed her xenobiological expertise to the analysis, identifying additional weaknesses in Zolari biology that could be exploited if necessary. "Their respiratory systems are adapted for low-oxygen environments," she explained during one of their planning sessions. "Earth-normal atmosphere is actually mildly toxic to them over extended periods. They need environmental suits for prolonged surface operations on worlds like this." Marcus began working with the colony's security chief, a former Earth military officer named David Rodriguez, to develop defensive strategies that took advantage of these vulnerabilities. They started small, organizing training exercises that appeared routine but actually prepared colonists for potential invasion scenarios. "The key is asymmetric warfare," Rodriguez explained to a gathered group of department heads. "We can't match their technology directly, but we can make occupation so costly and difficult that they'll reconsider their approach." Word of New Haven's preparations spread throughout the human colonial network, inspiring some settlements while alarming others. Several colonies sent messages urging compliance with Zolari demands to avoid galactic retaliation, while others offered covert support and intelligence sharing. Elena established communication networks with xenobiologists at other human settlements, sharing information about Zolari physiology and tactical vulnerabilities. The knowledge spread quickly through the scientific community, creating a foundation for coordinated resistance if the conflict expanded beyond New Haven. As the 30-day deadline approached, Marcus and Elena found themselves at the center of a debate that had implications far beyond their personal safety. Their refusal to comply with Zolari demands was being seen throughout human space as either heroic resistance or dangerous recklessness. "We could still leave," Elena said one evening as they walked through the settlement's central plaza. "Take Governor Walsh's offer and relocate to an independent system. Start over again, build a quiet life somewhere the Zolari won't find us. Marcus stopped walking and took her hands, looking into the eyes that had captivated him 23 years earlier.
Is that what you want?
Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching children playing in the plaza while their parents discussed the crisis in small groups.
I want to feel safe again, she said finally.
I want to go to sleep without wondering if tomorrow will bring Zolari warships.
But I also know that running won't really solve anything. They'll just find other humans to intimidate, other families to threaten. Then, we make our stand here, Marcus said. Together.
The deadline arrived with deceptive calm. New Haven's communication array received the expected message from the Galactic Trade Consortium, formally notifying the settlement that economic sanctions would begin immediately due to their failure to comply with lawful extradition requests. Trade agreements were suspended, technology imports halted, and mineral export contracts voided. But, the consortium's message also contained an unexpected addendum. Commander Vexal had been granted authority to personally oversee compliance enforcement, with full discretion to use whatever methods he deemed necessary to secure the surrender of the wanted criminals. Translation: Rodriguez said grimly as he reviewed the message with Marcus and Governor Walsh. They've given him permission to take revenge however he sees fit, as long as he eventually delivers you to Zolari authority. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Vexal was not simply seeking legal satisfaction for his injury, but personal vengeance against the humans who had humiliated him. The formal legal process was just a convenient cover for what was essentially a personal vendetta with galactic backing.
Within hours of the deadline's expiration, long-range sensors detected ships entering the system.
The vessels were of mixed design, suggesting that Vexal had assembled a force from multiple sources rather than using official Zolari military assets. 3 ships were clearly Zolari construction, sleek and deadly with advanced weapon systems, while the others appeared to be mercenary vessels hired for the operation.
6 ships total, reported Chief Rodriguez from the settlement's operations center.
Zolari cruiser, 2 Zolari destroyers, and 3 mercenary frigates of unknown configuration. Estimated arrival at planetary orbit in 18 hours. Governor Walsh activated the colony's emergency protocols, sending civilians to reinforced shelters while security teams took positions throughout the settlement. The defensive systems that had been discreetly upgraded over the previous weeks powered up, though everyone understood that conventional resistance would be brief and futile against such overwhelming force. Marcus and Elena worked together to implement the unconventional defensive strategies they had developed, using Elena's xenobiological knowledge and Marcus's engineering skills to create surprises that the Zolari would not anticipate. They had no illusions about achieving military victory, but they could make the cost of occupation higher than Vexal expected. As night fell over New Haven, the colonists gathered in the central plaza for what might be their final community meeting. Governor Walsh addressed the crowd, explaining the situation and giving every family the option to evacuate to emergency shelters in the mountains rather than risk the coming confrontation. To Marcus's amazement, less than 50 people chose evacuation. The rest of the colonists, families with children and elderly couples alike, voted to remain and defend their home against alien invasion. They had not come to the stars to surrender at the first sign of serious opposition. "We came here to build something that would last," said Sarah Martinez, the teacher whose children played in the plaza where they now planned their resistance.
"If we give up now, what message does that send to our children about standing up for what's right?"
Elena squeezed Marcus's hand as they listened to their neighbors speak about courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. These were ordinary people who had found extraordinary strength when faced with the choice between submission and resistance. The Zolari ships achieved orbital position during the night, their presence visible as moving stars that tracked across the sky in perfect formation. Dawn brought the expected communication from Commander Vexal, his image appearing on every screen in the settlement as he delivered his ultimatum. The Zolari commander had recovered from his physical injuries, but the psychological damage was evident in his cold, controlled fury. When he spoke, his words carried the promise of retaliation that would extend far beyond the specific humans he sought. "Citizens of New Haven," Vexal began, his voice rendered into English by translation software, "your illegal resistance to lawful galactic authority ends now. Surrender the criminals Marcus and Elena Chen within 1 standard hour, or face the consequences of defying Zolari justice." Marcus stepped forward to respond, his words broadcast not only to Vexal but to every human settlement in the sector through Elena's communication network. "Commander Vexal," Marcus said clearly, "your demand for surrender is rejected.
New Haven stands free, and its citizens will not be intimidated by threats from bullies and kidnappers. If you want us, you'll have to come and take us. Vexhal's image flickered with what might have been amusement. Very well. You have chosen to learn the price of defying superior authority. Your settlement will serve as an example to other primitive species who forget their proper place in galactic civilization. The transmission ended, leaving New Haven to wait for the assault they knew was coming. Marcus and Elena took positions with the other defenders, checking equipment one final time and saying quiet goodbyes that they hoped would not be permanent. Above them, the Zalari ships began their descent toward the planet's surface, their elegant forms cutting through the atmosphere like silver daggers aimed at the heart of human defiance. The battle for New Haven was about to begin, and the outcome would determine not only the fate of one small colony but the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy beyond. The first Zalari shuttles touched down at dawn, their sleek forms settling onto the rocky plain 2 kilometers outside New Haven's perimeter with mechanical precision. Marcus watched through high-powered binoculars from his position in the settlement's central tower, counting the deployment of troops and equipment that would soon test every defensive preparation they had made. Commander Vexhal had brought nearly 200 soldiers, a mix of Zalari regulars and mercenary forces from species that Marcus didn't recognize. The aliens moved with the confidence of professionals who had never encountered serious resistance from primitive worlds, their formation patterns suggesting they expected token opposition before inevitable surrender. "They're setting up some kind of command post," Elena reported from her position at the communication station. Her xenobiology training had proven invaluable in interpreting alien equipment configurations and movement patterns. 3 large structures, probably containing neural manipulation devices and atmospheric processors. Marcus nodded grimly. The Zalari were preparing for a prolonged occupation rather than a quick strike, which meant they intended to take prisoners for interrogation and experimentation. The atmospheric processors would allow them to operate in comfort while conducting their work, protected from the slightly toxic effects of Earth-normal air. Chief Rodriguez coordinated the defensive response from the security center, his military experience evident in the comm efficiency with which he managed the colony's limited resources. "Teams Alpha through Delta are in position around the perimeter," he reported. "Emergency shelters are sealed and supplied for 30 days. Medical station is prepared for casualties." The opening assault came exactly 1 hour after landing, preceded by a broadcast that was transmitted to every receiver in the settlement. Commander Vexhal's image appeared on screens throughout New Haven, his words carrying the arrogance of someone who believed victory was already assured. "Final surrender demand," Vexhal announced. "Deliver the criminals Chen and submit to lawful occupation, or face the consequences of continued resistance. You have 5 minutes to comply." Marcus stepped up to the communication console, knowing that his response would be heard not only by the Zalari commander but by human colonies throughout the sector. Elena's communication network had ensured that this confrontation would be witnessed by thousands of their fellow colonists. "Commander Vexhal," Marcus said clearly, "New Haven's answer remains the same. We will not surrender our citizens to alien justice, and we will not submit to occupation by forces that consider humans to be experimental subjects. If you want to take this settlement, you'll have to fight for every meter of ground." The transmission ended, and Marcus turned to face the other defenders gathered in the central tower. These were ordinary colonists who had never expected to face combat when they signed up for peaceful settlement work, but their faces showed determination rather than fear. "Remember the plan," Marcus said. "We're not trying to defeat them in direct combat. We're making this operation so costly and difficult that they'll reconsider their approach to dealing with humans. Every minute we hold them off, every casualty we inflict, sends a message to the galaxy that humanity will not be intimidated." The first wave of the assault targeted the settlement's power grid and communication arrays, as expected. Zalari energy weapons struck with pinpoint accuracy, disabling the primary generators and severing the main transmission towers. But the aliens had not anticipated the extensive backup systems that Marcus had installed over the previous weeks. Secondary power sources came online immediately, maintaining critical systems throughout the settlement. The communication network switched to buried fiber optic cables that were virtually invisible from above, preserving contact with the outside galaxy. Most importantly, the electromagnetic pulse generators that Elena had designed based on Zalari neural vulnerability remained hidden and operational. Phase 1 complete, Rodriguez reported as alien forces began advancing toward the settlement's perimeter. They've neutralized our obvious targets, and now they're confident that we're crippled. Time to teach them otherwise.
The Zalari ground forces moved in standard formation, expecting to encounter scattered small arms fire from desperate colonists. Instead, they found prepared defensive positions manned by people who had spent months studying alien physiology and tactical vulnerabilities. Marcus triggered the first surprise when the lead Zalari squad reached the outer defensive line. Concealed speakers throughout the area activated simultaneously, broadcasting electromagnetic frequencies specifically calibrated to interfere with Zalari neural implants. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The advancing aliens stumbled and fell as their sophisticated neural enhancement systems overloaded, leaving them temporarily paralyzed and disoriented. Their mercenary allies, unaffected by the targeted frequencies, found themselves separated from their primary support and facing determined resistance from unexpected directions. Elena's xenobiological research had identified the exact electromagnetic patterns that would cause maximum disruption to Zalari nervous systems without permanently damaging their neural implants. The goal was to create chaos and confusion, not to commit genocide against a superior force. From hidden positions throughout the settlement, colonists opened fire with conventional weapons upgraded with specialized ammunition. Marcus had spent weeks manufacturing projectiles designed to penetrate Zalari environmental suits without causing fatal injuries. The intent was to force the invaders to deal with equipment failures and medical emergencies rather than focusing on advance and conquest. The first hour of battle went far better than anyone in New Haven had dared to hope. The Zalari forces, expecting easy victory, found themselves bogged down in complex urban combat against opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. The electromagnetic interference made their neural coordination systems unreliable, while the specialized ammunition created a steady stream of equipment malfunctions. But Marcus knew that initial success would not last. Commander Vexhal would adapt to their unconventional tactics, and the Zalari's technological advantages would eventually overcome human ingenuity. The question was whether they could hold out long enough for their resistance to inspire broader action throughout human space. The answer came from an unexpected source. As the battle raged through its second hour, Elena's communication station began receiving messages from other human settlements throughout the sector. The broadcasts were brief and coded, but their meaning was clear. New Johannesburg reports system malfunction in Zalari trade station, Elena called out over the sound of weapons fire. New Mumbai confirms spontaneous equipment failures at Zalari research facility. New Berlin reports that their Zalari commercial representatives have suddenly departed without explanation. Marcus felt a surge of hope as he understood what was happening. The battle for New Haven was inspiring coordinated resistance throughout human space, with colonists using the tactical information they had shared to strike at Zalari interests on dozens of worlds simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse technology that Elena had developed was being replicated in settlements across the sector, causing chaos in Zalari operations wherever humans had access to their equipment. More importantly, the psychological impact was demonstrating that humans could fight back effectively against their supposed superiors. But Commander Vexhal was not prepared to accept defeat, especially not at the hands of the same humans who had humiliated him months earlier. His response escalated the conflict to a level that none of the defenders had anticipated. Orbital bombardment platforms activated, Rodriguez reported grimly from his position at the scanner station. Multiple targeting systems focusing on the settlement. Estimated time to weapons impact, 6 minutes. Marcus felt his heart sink as he realized what Vexhal intended. Unable to achieve victory through ground assault, the Zalari commander was preparing to destroy New Haven entirely rather than suffer the embarrassment of retreat. The orbital weapons could level the settlement in minutes, eliminating all evidence of successful human resistance. All units to emergency shelters, Marcus broadcast over the communication system. Civilian evacuation protocols immediate implementation. This is not a drill. Elena grabbed his arm as families began running toward the reinforced underground facilities that might offer protection from orbital bombardment. The shelters weren't designed for that level of assault, she said urgently. They'll provide maybe 10 minutes of protection before the structures collapse. Marcus looked around at the settlement they had built together, the homes and schools and workshops that represented humanity's determination to create something lasting among the stars. In 6 minutes, it would all be reduced to smoking craters because he had refused to let aliens kidnap his wife. I won't let them do this, Marcus said, his voice carrying the same cold determination that had driven him to break Vexhal's wrist.
Not to these people, not to our home. He turned to Chief Rodriguez, who was coordinating the evacuation with professional calm despite the hopelessness of their situation. David, how many people can the shuttles evacuate in 5 minutes? Rodriguez checked his tactical display quickly. Maybe 50 people, maximum. Mostly children and elderly. The rest of us will have to take our chances in the shelters. Elena understood what Marcus was considering before he spoke the words. No, she said firmly. Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no. We're not splitting up, not now. Someone needs to stop that orbital bombardment, Marcus replied. The only way to do that is to give Vexhal what he wants. Me. The plan crystallized in Marcus's mind with desperate clarity. Commander Vexhal's personal vendetta was driving the escalation beyond military necessity. If Marcus surrendered himself, the Zalari commander might be satisfied enough to spare the settlement and its civilians. He'll kill you, Elena said, tears streaming down her face as explosions echoed from the perimeter where the ground battle continued. Or worse, they'll use those neural devices to turn you into a mindless slave. Marcus took her hands for what might be the last time, looking into the eyes that had anchored his life for over 20 years. Maybe, he said softly. But, if I don't try, everyone dies. 2,000 people, including all the children. I can't live with that choice. Elena was about to respond when an unexpected voice cut through their conversation. The communication station crackled to life with a transmission that carried the authority of galactic law enforcement. Attention Zalari forces in the Kepler 442 system, the voice announced in the universal trade language. This is Captain Gentai of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force vessel Harmony's Edge. You are ordered to cease all hostile actions immediately and submit to inspection under Article 7 of the Galactic Protection Accords. Marcus and Elena stared at each other in amazement as the transmission continued. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force was a multi-species organization that operated independently from the Trade Consortium, with authority to investigate violations of interspecies law. Commander Vexhal, Captain Gentai continued, your authorization for this operation has been revoked by joint order of the Peacekeeping Council and the Galactic Ethics Committee. The systematic intimidation of sentient species violates multiple treaties to which the Zalari Science Council is signatory. On the tactical display, new contacts appeared as 3 large vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The ships were of distinctive design, carrying the multi-species crews and advanced sensor arrays that marked them as peacekeeping force vessels. Chief Rodriguez looked up from his scanner station with the first smile Marcus had seen from him in days. Orbital bombardment platforms are powering down, he reported. Zalari ground forces are receiving recall orders. Looks like the cavalry just arrived. Elena threw her arms around Marcus, relief evident in every line of her body. How did they know? She asked. How did the peacekeeping force find out what was happening here? The answer came through the communication system as Captain Gentai's voice returned, this time speaking directly to New Haven's leadership. Governor Walsh, this is Captain Gentai. We received formal complaints from 17 human settlements regarding systematic Zalari harassment and illegal occupation attempts. Your settlement's resistance bought us time to investigate and respond. Marcus realized that their refusal to surrender had accomplished far more than simply protecting New Haven. By holding out long enough for the broader pattern of Zalari aggression to become visible, they had triggered galactic intervention that could protect human settlements throughout the sector. Commander Vexhal's image appeared on the communication screen one final time, his expression showing the fury of someone who had come within minutes of achieving total victory only to have it snatched away by legal technicalities. This intervention will not protect you forever, Vexhal said, directing his words specifically at Marcus and Elena. The Zalari have long memories, and galactic politics change over time. We will remember this humiliation. Marcus stepped forward to respond, no longer the desperate defender of a doomed settlement but a representative of a species that had proven its right to respect. And we'll remember that humans don't surrender to bullies, regardless of their technology or political connections. If you want to try this again, you'll find us ready. The transmission ended as Zalari forces began withdrawing to their ships, leaving behind damaged equipment and the clear evidence that their supposedly primitive opponents had fought them to a standstill. The orbital bombardment platforms remained offline, their weapon systems locked down by peacekeeping force override codes. Within hours, the Zalari task force departed the system under peacekeeping force escort, carrying Commander Vexhal to face formal charges before a galactic tribunal.
The investigation that followed would reveal a pattern of systematic intimidation and illegal experimentation directed at human colonies throughout the sector. As night fell over New Haven, the colonists emerged from their shelters to survey a settlement that had been scarred by battle but not destroyed. Smoke rose from damaged buildings, and the perimeter defensive position showed the marks of heavy fighting, but the essential structures remained intact. Marcus and Elena stood together in the central plaza, surrounded by neighbors who had risked everything to defend their shared home. The children who had played here yesterday were already planning how to repair the damage, their voices bright with excitement as they described the day when aliens learned that humans could not be intimidated.
So what happens now?
Elena asked, leaning against her husband as they watched the community begin the process of rebuilding. Marcus considered the question carefully, understanding that their victory at New Haven was only the beginning of a larger transformation in humanity's relationship with the galaxy.
Now we prove that this wasn't just luck or desperation, he said.
We show the galaxy that humans deserve respect as equals, not tolerance as primitives. Governor Walsh approached them as the last of the colonists headed home to assess damage to their individual properties. Marcus, Elena, I've been in contact with the peacekeeping force. Captain Gentai wants to debrief both of you regarding the tactical innovations you developed.
Apparently, several other species are interested in electromagnetic pulse technology for defense against neural manipulation weapons.
Elena smiled at the implications.
You mean our research could help other species defend themselves against Solari intimidation?
More than that, Walsh replied. The peacekeeping force is recommending that humans be granted advanced membership status in the Galactic Protection Accords, with authority to assist in defending primitive worlds against exploitation by technological superior species.
Marcus felt the weight of unintended consequences settling on his shoulders.
He had simply wanted to protect his wife from alien kidnappers, but his actions had started a chain of events that could transform humanity's position in galactic civilization.
One thing at a time, he said pragmatically.
First we rebuild New Haven and make sure our people are safe. Then, we figure out what kind of future we want to build among the stars. Above them, the alien sky sparkled with stars that no longer seemed quite so distant or threatening. Humanity had faced its first real test in galactic politics and emerged not as victims but as defenders of principles that transcended species boundaries. The battle for New Haven was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had only begun. 2 years after the Battle of New Haven, Marcus Gen stood before the Galactic Council Assembly on the neutral station of Concordia Prime, his words being translated into 47 different languages as he addressed representatives from across the galaxy. The chamber's vast amphitheater design accommodated beings of radically different sizes and environmental needs, from the towering crystalline Vorthak to the diminutive energy-based Lumeri. Honorable representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the advanced translation systems, we gather today not to assign blame for past conflicts, but to establish principles that will prevent future exploitation of developing civilizations. Elena sat in the human delegation area, watching her husband address the assembly with the same quiet determination that had driven him to protect her on Kepler Station so long ago. The years between that first confrontation and this moment had transformed both of them from simple colonists into reluctant leaders of humanity's emergence as a galactic power.
The journey had not been easy.
Following their victory at New Haven, Marcus and Elena had found themselves at the center of a diplomatic revolution that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between technological advancement and political authority. Their development of effective countermeasures against neural manipulation had inspired dozens of species to reconsider their positions in galactic civilization. The principle we propose today is simple, Marcus continued, his words measured and deliberate. No species, regardless of technological superiority, has the right to subject sentient beings to involuntary experimentation, neural modification, or forced compliance. Consent must be freely given and may be freely withdrawn, without economic or military retaliation.
Murmurs of discussion rippled through the assembly as representatives debated the implications of Marcus's proposal.
The Galactic Protection Accords that emerged from the New Haven incident had already established basic protections for developing species, but this new framework would extend those rights to all sentient beings regardless of their technological capabilities. The Zalari delegation sat in conspicuous silence, their pale forms rigid with controlled anger as they listened to proposals that would fundamentally limit their traditional methods of scientific inquiry. Commander Vexel had been convicted of illegal occupation and sentenced to neural modification that eliminated his capacity for commanding military forces, but the broader Zalari establishment remained hostile to human influence in galactic affairs.
Elena's attention was drawn to the arrival of new delegates entering the chamber.
Captain Gentai of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force had brought representatives from 6 species that had suffered under Zolari intimidation, their presence intended to demonstrate the widespread nature of the problem that New Haven's resistance had exposed.
Among the new arrivals was Ambassador Kthara of the Sertari Collective, whose aquatic species had endured decades of forced participation in Zolari neural research projects. The Sertari's translation devices rendered her fluid speech patterns into crisp English as she approached the human delegation area.
Dr. Chan, Kthara said, addressing Elena with formal courtesy, the Sertari Collective wishes to express gratitude for the xenobiological research you have shared with our scientists. Your electromagnetic pulse technology has allowed us to disable Zolari monitoring devices throughout our home system. Elena smiled warmly at the ambassador, remembering the months of careful research that had gone into understanding the vulnerabilities of Zolari neural implants.
I'm glad our work could help.
The principle of shared knowledge benefits all species when used for defense rather than aggression. The formal session continued for several hours, with representatives from multiple species describing their experiences with Zolari expansion and their hopes for the proposed protection framework. Marcus found himself serving as an unofficial coordinator for the developing coalition, his role as the human who had first successfully resisted Zolari authority giving him unique credibility among species seeking alternatives to submission. During a recess in the proceedings, Marcus and Elena met privately with Captain Gentai to discuss the practical challenges of implementing the new protections. The peacekeeping force had grown significantly since the New Haven incident, with several species contributing ships and personnel to create a truly galactic law enforcement organization. The fundamental problem, Captain Gentai explained, her own species' complex vocal patterns requiring careful translation, is that the Galactic Trait Consortium has traditionally operated on the assumption that technological advancement equals political authority. Your species has demonstrated that this assumption is flawed, but changing established systems requires more than single examples of successful resistance.
Marcus nodded thoughtfully.
The political complexities of galactic civilization were far more intricate than anything he had encountered during his years as a manufacturing engineer.
What would it take to create lasting change rather than temporary accommodation?
Proof that cooperation between equals produces better outcomes than domination by superiors, Gentai replied. The electromagnetic pulse technology represents one example, but broader demonstration would be more compelling.
Elena had been quietly considering the same question during the months of preparation for this assembly. We've been focusing on defensive applications of our research, but what if we developed cooperative projects that benefited multiple species simultaneously?
The conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from New Haven. Governor Walsh appeared on the holographic display, her expression showing the controlled urgency of someone dealing with a developing crisis. Marcus, Elena, we've got a situation developing in the Kepler 442 system, Walsh reported.
Long-range sensors are detecting an unidentified fleet approaching our position. Configuration suggests Solari construction, but no official diplomatic contact has been established.
Marcus felt the familiar cold focus that came with threats to his home and family.
How long until arrival?
18 hours, Walsh replied. The fleet consists of 12 vessels, significantly larger than Vexel's force 2 years ago.
We've contacted the peacekeeping force, but their nearest ships are 3 days away.
Elena gripped Marcus's arm as they both understood the implications. The Zolari establishment was making one final attempt to reassert their authority over humanity, timing their move to coincide with the Galactic Assembly discussions that threatened to permanently limit their expansion methods.
Captain Gentai's expression showed the frustration of someone whose forces were stretched too thin across an enormous galaxy. I can authorize civilian evacuation if New Haven wishes to withdraw rather than face another siege. Marcus shook his head immediately.
Evacuation would send exactly the wrong message to every species watching these proceedings. If we run now, it demonstrates that humans only resist when we're confident of outside protection.
Then, what do you propose? Gentai asked.
New Haven's defensive improvements are impressive, but 12 Zolari warships represent overwhelming force even for your enhanced capabilities.
Elena's response surprised everyone in the room. What if we don't fight them at all?
Marcus looked at his wife with curiosity rather than shock, understanding that her scientific mind had developed some alternative approach to the problem.
Explain.
The electromagnetic pulse technology works because it exploits specific vulnerabilities in Zolari neural implants, Elena said, her excitement building as she outlined her thinking.
But we've only used it defensively, to disable their systems during ground combat. What if we could scale it up to affect their ship's navigation and weapons systems? Captain Jintai leaned forward with interest. Shipboard electromagnetic pulse weapons exist, but they require massive power sources and sophisticated targeting systems. New Haven doesn't have access to that level of technology. Elena smiled with the expression Marcus recognized from their early years when she had solved particularly complex research problems. We don't need shipboard weapons. We need a planetary-scale electromagnetic field generator that can disable electronic systems throughout the entire system. The concept was audacious beyond anything Marcus had previously considered. Rather than fighting the Zalari fleet, Elena was proposing to trap it in a system where their advanced technology would become useless, forcing them to negotiate or retreat rather than attack. Is such a system possible? Marcus asked. With the resources available at New Haven, yes, Elena replied. We'd need to modify the fusion reactors to create massive electromagnetic field generators, then coordinate the pulse timing to create system-wide interference. The effect would be temporary, maybe 6 hours before their systems could compensate, but that might be enough. Captain Jintai consulted her datapad quickly, running calculations on the proposed system. The power requirements would be enormous. You'd risk overloading your entire infrastructure. Better than risking our entire population, Marcus pointed out. Besides, if this works, we'll have demonstrated a defensive capability that doesn't rely on violence or superior firepower. That could change everything about how conflicts are resolved in galactic space. The decision was made quickly, driven by the approaching deadline and the broader implications for the galactic assembly proceedings. Marcus and Elena would return to New Haven immediately to coordinate the implementation of the planetary electromagnetic field system, while Captain Jintai would present their plan to the assembled representatives as an example of innovative nonviolent resistance. The journey back to New Haven took 14 hours, leaving barely 4 hours to implement Elena's theoretical system before the Zalari fleet arrived. Marcus threw himself into the engineering challenges with the same focused determination that had driven him to break Vexal's wrist, working alongside Elena and Chief Rodriguez to transform concept into reality. The modifications required precise coordination between New Haven's 3 fusion reactors and the network of electromagnetic pulse generators that had been installed throughout the settlement. Elena's calculations indicated that synchronized activation would create a field effect powerful enough to interfere with sophisticated electronics throughout the system while leaving simpler human technology largely unaffected. Field generators positioned and calibrated, Rodriguez reported as the last of the technical teams finished their installations. Fusion reactors operating at maximum safe capacity. We're as ready as we're going to be. Marcus checked the chronometer display showing time until the Zalari fleet's arrival. 6 minutes remained, barely enough time for final systems checks and personnel safety measures. Around the settlement, colonists gathered in reinforced buildings that would provide some protection if the plan failed catastrophically. Elena stood beside him at the main control console, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. If this doesn't work, she said quietly, the electromagnetic feedback could destroy our entire power grid and leave us defenseless. And if it does work, Marcus replied, we'll have demonstrated that humans can protect themselves without becoming the aggressors. That's worth the risk. The Zalari fleet dropped out of hyperspace precisely on schedule, 12 sleek warships arranging themselves in attack formation above New Haven. Their commander's transmission followed immediately, broadcast to the settlement and to the galactic assembly proceedings being held at Concordia Prime. Citizens of New Haven, the voice announced in accented English, you will surrender the war criminals Marcus and Elena Chen within 1 standard hour, or face complete destruction of your settlement. The Zalari Science Council has voted to end this unprecedented interference with galactic order. Marcus stepped up to the communication console for what had become a familiar ritual. Commander, he said clearly, New Haven's answer remains unchanged. We will not surrender our citizens to alien authority. If you wish to take this settlement, you're welcome to try. The transmission ended, leaving New Haven to wait for the assault that everyone expected. But Marcus had no intention of allowing the conflict to follow the same pattern as their previous encounter. This time, humanity would demonstrate capabilities that the galaxy had never seen. Electromagnetic field generators activate on my mark, Marcus announced over the settlement's communication system. All personnel to shielded positions. Field activation in 10 seconds. Elena's hand joined his on the activation controls as they counted down together. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Every electronic system in the Kepler 442 system suddenly shut down as a massive electromagnetic pulse propagated outward from New Haven at the speed of light. The Zalari warships went dark, their engines failing and their weapons systems offline as neural implants throughout their crews overloaded temporarily. But the pulse affected more than just the attacking fleet. Every artificial satellite, communication relay, and automated system in the star system ceased functioning as the electromagnetic field swept across them. For 6 hours, the Kepler 442 system became a technology-free zone where only the simplest mechanical devices continued to operate. New Haven itself experienced partial power failures as the massive energy drain temporarily overloaded their fusion reactors, but backup systems maintained life support and basic communications. The colonists emerged from their shelters to see 12 Zalari warships drifting powerlessly in orbit above their world, their crews struggling to restore basic functionality to disabled systems. The silence was broken by a transmission from an unexpected source. One of the Zalari ships had restored limited communications capability and was broadcasting on emergency frequencies normally reserved for distress calls. New Haven Settlement, the voice said in carefully pronounced English, "This is Sub-Commander Twail of the Zalari vessel Righteous Pursuit. We require immediate assistance with life support system failures. Our atmospheric processors are offline and our emergency reserves are limited." Marcus and Elena looked at each other as they realized the full implications of their success. Not only had they disabled the attacking fleet, but they had created a situation where their enemies needed human assistance to survive. The choice of how to respond would define humanity's character in the eyes of the galaxy. "This is Marcus Chen responding to Sub-Commander Twail," Marcus said into the communication system. "New Haven stands ready to provide humanitarian assistance to all vessels in distress. We'll transmit technical specifications for jury-rigging your atmospheric systems using components that weren't affected by the electromagnetic pulse." Elena began preparing the technical data that could save Zalari lives, her xenobiological expertise proving invaluable in adapting human life support technology for alien physiology. "They'll be dependent on our help for at least 12 hours, she told Marcus. "Long enough for the peacekeeping force to arrive and mediate the situation." The next day brought representatives from the Galactic Assembly, including species that had traveled across the galaxy to witness humanity's innovative approach to conflict resolution. The sight of Zalari warships being assisted by the same humans they had come to destroy created a powerful symbol that resonated throughout galactic civilization. Captain Gentai arrived with the peacekeeping force fleet, but her ships found no battle to interrupt, only a cooperative rescue operation that demonstrated principles the galaxy had never seen applied on such a scale. The Zalari crews, humbled by their dependence on human assistance, agreed to formal negotiations under peacekeeping force mediation. The settlement that followed established New Haven as the site of the Galactic Cooperation Institute, an organization dedicated to developing non-violent solutions to interspecies conflicts. Marcus and Elena found themselves appointed as co-directors, their experience with both resistance and assistance making them uniquely qualified to guide the Institute's mission. Commander Vexhal's replacement, Sub-Commander Twail, became an unexpected advocate for the new cooperation framework after her crew's rescue by human colonists. Her testimony before the Galactic Council helped establish the precedent that technological superiority did not automatically grant moral authority. 5 years later, Marcus and Elena stood once again in the central plaza of New Haven, watching children from 7 different species play together while their parents worked on joint research projects sponsored by the Cooperation Institute. The settlement had grown from a simple mining colony into a symbol of what could be achieved when species worked together as equals. "Any regrets?" Elena asked, her hand finding his as they observed the peaceful scene that had grown from their moment of desperate resistance. Marcus considered the question carefully, thinking of the quiet life they might have lived if he had simply allowed Commander Vexhal to take Elena for examination years ago. They could have avoided the battles, the political complexities, and the enormous responsibilities that now defined their existence. "None," he said finally. "When someone threatens your family, you protect them. When someone threatens innocent people, you stand up to them. And, when you have the chance to build something better than what existed before, you take it." Above them, the alien sky showed ships from dozens of species coming and going from New Haven's expanded spaceport, carrying the ideas and technologies that were slowly transforming galactic civilization. The electromagnetic pulse system had been shared freely with any species seeking defensive capabilities, while the Cooperation Institute continued developing new approaches to interspecies conflict.
The Battle of New Haven had ended with humanity's victory, but the war for the galaxy's future had been won through cooperation, understanding, and the simple principle that protecting those you love sometimes requires changing the world. Marcus and Elena had learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the determination to prove that there are better ways for civilized beings to treat each other. As the sun set over their adopted world, they walked home together through streets filled with the sounds of multiple species working, learning, and building something that had never existed before in galactic history, a truly cooperative civilization where strength came from unity rather than dominance, and where the protection of the weak was considered the highest calling of the strong.